Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the pristine corridors of Nexus Station 7, the largest interstellar trading hub in the Galactic Federation's Outer Rim territories. His worn jumpsuit bore the faded logo of Universal Maintenance Corp., and his weathered hands gripped the cart's handle with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this job for far too long. To the thousands of alien species that passed him daily, he was invisible, just another human janitor keeping their gleaming station spotless. The irony wasn't lost on him. 3 years ago, he had commanded the UES Prometheus, humanity's most advanced deep space exploration vessel. 3 years ago, he had worn the crisp, white uniform of an Earth Navy captain, leading diplomatic missions to establish first contact with dozens of civilizations. 3 years ago, everything had changed. The cleaning solution sloshed in its container as Marcus navigated around a group of Zephyrian merchants, their crystalline bodies refracting the station's artificial sunlight into dancing rainbows across the walls. They didn't even glance at him. None of them ever did. Humans were a relatively new addition to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. In a galaxy where some civilizations have been spacefaring for millennia, humanity was considered primitive, barely worth acknowledging. Marcus had learned to prefer it that way. Anonymity was safer than the alternative. He stopped at his next assigned area, the high-security diplomatic wing, where the station's most important meetings took place. The bioscanners at the entrance barely registered his presence, programmed to ignore maintenance staff. His clearance level was so low that the security systems treated him like a piece of mobile furniture. As he began mopping the floors outside Conference Room Alpha 7, Marcus could hear the heated discussion taking place inside. The universal translator in his earpiece picked up fragments of conversation in a dozen different languages, all centered around the same topic that had dominated galactic politics for the past 6 months: the search for the lost Imperial heir. The Kethvarian Empire had ruled a significant portion of the galaxy for over 2,000 years, maintaining peace through a delicate balance of military might and diplomatic finesse. Their emperor, Kythel the Wise, had died suddenly, without naming a successor, throwing the empire into chaos. According to ancient law, only one bearing the genetic markers of the original royal bloodline could claim the throne. The problem was that the royal family had intermarried with hundreds of different species across the centuries, scattering those genetic markers throughout the galaxy. The search had become desperate. Without an emperor, the various worlds of the empire were beginning to fracture into competing factions. Wars had already broken out in 3 systems, and the Galactic Federation was struggling to maintain order. Every major government, corporation, and criminal organization in the galaxy was hunting for potential heirs, hoping to install a puppet ruler and gain control of the Empire's vast resources. Marcus wrung out his mop and moved closer to the conference room's ventilation grate, where he could hear the conversation more clearly. Inside, Admiral Forlack of the Andromedan Defense Force was speaking in his species' characteristic gravelly tone. "The genetic testing has yielded nothing useful," Forlack was saying. "We've scanned over 30 million beings across 200 worlds. The royal markers are so diluted that we're finding hundreds of potential matches, but none with enough concentration to legitimately claim the throne." A melodious voice that Marcus recognized as belonging to Ambassador Liriana of the Seraphim Collective responded, "Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. The ancient texts speak of the markers manifesting more strongly during times of great stress or when the Empire itself is threatened. The original Emperor united the galaxy during the War of the Seven Suns. Maybe we need to look for someone who has demonstrated similar qualities under pressure." "Theoretical nonsense," snorted a third voice, Counselor Grex of the Trade Alliance. "We need concrete genetic evidence, not fairy tales about mystical bloodline awakenings. The bioscanners don't lie. Either someone carries the markers or they don't." Marcus had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times over the past months. The galactic elite were running out of options, and their desperation was beginning to show. He finished cleaning the corridor and was about to move on when something unexpected happened. The conference room door slid open, and Ambassador Liriana stepped out, her tall, elegant form moving with the fluid grace characteristic of her people. The Seraphim were among the most ancient and respected races in the galaxy, their longevity and wisdom making them natural diplomats and mediators. Liriana's silver hair flowed like liquid mercury, and her pale blue eyes held depths that seemed to contain centuries of knowledge. She paused when she saw Marcus, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Most beings look through him, but she was looking at him, really looking. "You've been cleaning this corridor for quite some time," she observed, her voice carrying a musical quality that was both beautiful and slightly unnerving. Marcus kept his head down, focusing on his cleaning supplies. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Sorry if I disturbed you." "Not at all," she said, stepping closer. "You're human, aren't you? I don't often see your species in this section of the station." "Yes, ma'am. Human. Just here to clean up, nothing more." Something in her expression shifted, a flicker of curiosity mixed with what might have been recognition. "What's your name?" Marcus hesitated. He'd been using a false identity for 3 years, but something about this woman's presence made lying feel impossible. "Marcuskin, Mom." "Marcus Chun," she repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's an interesting combination. Chinese and something else." "My mother was Scottish," Marcus found himself saying, though he wasn't sure why he was sharing personal information with a complete stranger. Liriana's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Chun, that's an ancient name, isn't it? I seem to recall reading about it in some very old historical documents." Before Marcus could respond, Counselor Grex emerged from the conference room, his reptilian features twisted in annoyance. "Liriana, we don't have time for socializing with the help. The Kethvarian Council is expecting our report within the hour." "Of course," Liriana said, but her gaze never left Marcus's face. "Perhaps we should run one more scan, though, just to be thorough. We've scanned everyone of importance on this station twice," Grex replied dismissively. "What would be the point?" "The point," Liriana said carefully, "is that the most important discoveries often come from the most unexpected places." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her tone that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. He needed to get away from here fast. "If you'll excuse me," he said, beginning to push his cart toward the nearest exit. "I have other areas to clean." "Wait," Liriana called after him, but Marcus was already moving, his heart pounding in his chest. He made it 3 corridors before the security drones found him. They appeared without warning, sleek, silver machines that materialized from hidden alcoves in the station's walls. Marcus had seen them in action before, usually when dealing with smugglers or other criminals. They were fast, efficient, and absolutely relentless. "Marcus Chun," the lead drone announced in its flat, mechanical voice, "you are required for immediate bioscanning by order of the Galactic Federation Diplomatic Corps. Please remain stationary." Marcus's mind raced. He could run, but where would he go? The station's security systems would track him down within minutes. He could fight, but his combat training was 3 years rusty, and these drones were equipped with enough firepower to level a city block. He raised his hands slowly. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." "No mistake," the drone replied. "Bioscanning commences in 3 The scanner beam hit Marcus like a wave of warm light, passing through his body from head to toe. He felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if every cell in his body was being examined and cataloged. The process took less than 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The drones went silent for a moment, processing the data. Then, simultaneously, they all began to emit a high-pitched alarm that echoed throughout the corridor. Emergency lights flashed red, and Marcus could hear the sound of running footsteps approaching from multiple directions. "Scan complete," the lead drone announced, its voice taking on what almost sounded like awe. "Genetic markers confirmed. Purity level, 97.4%. Identity verified." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "What did you just say?" The drone's optical sensors focused on him with laser precision. "Marcus Chun of Terra, you carry the genetic markers of the Kethvarian imperial bloodline at a concentration not seen since the reign of Emperor Kythol I. According to Galactic Federation Protocol 77 Alpha, you are hereby designated as the rightful heir to the Kethvarian Empire. The corridor erupted into chaos as security forces arrived from all directions. Federation Marines, Andromedan shock troopers, Seraphim observers, and representatives from a dozen other species converged on Marcus's location. The sound of their combined footsteps was like thunder in the metal corridors. Marcus stood frozen in the center of it all, his cleaning cart forgotten, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake, a malfunction in the scanning equipment, anything but what it appeared to be. Ambassador Liriana was among the first to arrive, her expression a mixture of triumph and something that looked almost like reverence. "I knew it," she breathed. "The moment I saw you, I knew there was something different." "This is impossible," sputtered Counselor Grex, his scales flushing a deep purple with agitation. "A human? A janitor? The bioscanners must be malfunctioning." "The bioscanners are functioning perfectly," Admiral Forlack rumbled, his massive form pushing through the crowd. "I've never seen readings this clear. This human carries more royal blood than any being we've tested in 6 months of searching." Marcus found his voice at last. "You're all insane. I'm nobody special. I'm just a maintenance worker trying to make a living. There has to be some mistake." "The scanners don't make mistakes of this magnitude," Liriana said gently. "Marcus Chun, whether you accept it or not, you are the heir to the Kethvarian Empire. You are, by right of blood and law, the rightful emperor of over 200 worlds." The crowd around Marcus began to kneel, one by one, until he was the only person standing in the corridor. The sight was surreal. Aliens from across the galaxy, many of whom commanded fleets and ruled entire star systems, bowing to a human janitor in a stained jumpsuit. "Get up," Marcus said desperately. "All of you get up. This is crazy." But they remained kneeling, and Marcus realized with growing horror that his life, as he knew it, was over. There would be no more hiding in plain sight, no more anonymous existence mopping floors and emptying trash cans. The galaxy had found its emperor, and that emperor was him. As news of the discovery spread throughout Nexus Station 7, Marcus could hear the announcement echoing through the corridors. "Attention all residents and visitors. The heir to the Kethvarian Empire has been found. Long live Emperor Marcus I." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to remember how to breathe. 3 years ago, he had been running from his past, from the terrible mistake that had cost him everything he held dear. Now that past was about to catch up with him in ways he could never have imagined. The galaxy had a new emperor, but Marcus Chun wondered if he would live long enough to claim his throne. Because there were secrets hidden in his genetic code that went far deeper than royal bloodlines. Secrets that some beings would kill to protect, and others would die to expose. The scanner had revealed the truth about his heritage, but it had also painted a target on his back that would make him the most hunted man in the galaxy. The real question wasn't whether he was worthy to be emperor. The question was whether the Empire was worthy to have him. The Imperial suite aboard Nexus Station 7 had been hastily prepared for its unexpected occupant. Marcus sat on the edge of an ornate bed that could have housed his entire apartment back on Earth, staring at his reflection in a mirror crafted from crystallized starlight. The face looking back at him was the same one he'd seen every morning for 34 years, weathered by hard work, marked by 3 years of manual labor, unremarkable by any standard he could think of. Yet according to the most advanced genetic scanners in the galaxy, this ordinary human face belonged to the rightful ruler of 200 worlds. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Ambassador Liriana, no longer wearing the formal diplomatic robes from their earlier encounter. Instead, she was dressed in simple traveling clothes that somehow managed to make her look even more regal than before. Behind her stood a figure Marcus didn't recognize, an elderly human woman with silver hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "Your Majesty," Liriana began, but Marcus cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't," he said. "Please don't call me that. I'm still just Marcus." Liriana exchanged a meaningful glance with her companion. "Marcus, then?" There are things you need to know, things that go far beyond what the bioscanners revealed. This is Dr. Sarah Morrison, formerly of the Earth Colonial Research Division. She's been searching for you for a very long time. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. Hello, Marcus. You probably don't remember me, but I knew your parents. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. My parents died in a transport accident when I was 6. I was raised by my uncle after that. That's what you were told, Dr. Morrison said gently. The truth is considerably more complicated. She moved to the room's central holo display and activated it with a gesture. Images began to appear in the air between them. Star charts, genetic sequences, historical documents that looked ancient beyond measure. Your mother, Li Chun, wasn't just a xenoarchaeologist, Dr. Morrison continued. She was part of a secret research project investigating the origins of human space travel. We discovered evidence that humanity had achieved interstellar flight thousands of years before our official first contact with alien civilizations. Marcus laughed bitterly. That's impossible. Human history is well documented. We didn't leave Earth until 2157. Human history as it's taught in schools, yes, Dr. Morrison agreed. But the real history is far stranger. Marcus, your mother discovered that humans have been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. Not just traveling, thriving. There were human colonies scattered across the galaxy long before we developed our current technology. The holo display shifted, showing images of ancient ruins on worlds Marcus had never heard of. Structures that were unmistakably human in design, yet built with technologies that seemed impossibly advanced. These colonies were established by a group of humans who called themselves the Wanderers, Dr. Morrison explained. They possessed knowledge of genetics, space travel, and energy manipulation that we're only beginning to understand today. But something happened to them. Around 1,500 years ago, they simply vanished from the galactic stage. What does this have to do with me? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. Ambassador Liriana stepped forward. The Wanderers didn't disappear, Marcus. They integrated. They spread out across the galaxy, intermarrying with dozens of species, sharing their genetic heritage with alien bloodlines. The Kethvarian royal family was one of the first to welcome them. You're saying the humans founded the Kethvarian Empire? Not founded, Dr. Morrison corrected, but they were instrumental in its creation. The first emperor, Kythel I, was only half Kethvarian. The other half was human, descended from the Wanderers. That's why the royal genetic markers have been so difficult to trace. They're not purely Kethvarian. They're a hybrid genome that combines the best traits of both species. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. And you think I'm descended from these Wanderers? We don't think, Liriana said. We know. Your mother spent her entire career trying to trace the Wanderer bloodlines. She found dozens of potential descendants, but none with the genetic purity necessary to activate the dormant traits. Until she tested herself. The holo display showed a genetic chart that meant nothing to Marcus but seemed to fascinate the two women. Li Chun carried Wanderer genes at a concentration of 47%, Dr. Morrison explained. When she married your father, David Chun, a descendant of one of the lost Scottish Wanderer clans, the combination created something unprecedented. You, Liriana said simply. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the room's massive viewing port that showed the swirling nebula beyond the station. This is insane. You're talking about lost civilizations and ancient bloodlines like it's some kind of fantasy story. I understand your skepticism, Dr. Morrison said. I felt the same way when your mother first presented her evidence to me. But consider this. The bioscanners found royal markers in your DNA at a concentration of over 97%. That's higher than any member of the Kethvarian royal family in the past 500 years. How do you explain that? Marcus didn't have an answer. He pressed his forehead against the cool, transparent aluminum of the viewing port and tried to make sense of what he was hearing. What happened to my parents? The real story. They were murdered, Dr. Morrison said quietly, by agents of the Shadow Syndicate, a criminal organization that's been hunting Wanderer descendants for centuries. They're trying to eliminate all potential heirs to prevent the Empire from stabilizing. Your parents discovered the plot and tried to go into hiding, but they were betrayed. By who? Someone they trusted, Liriana said. Someone close to the research project. We never found out who, but the attack was too precise, too well-informed to be random. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling 3 decades of carefully constructed memories crumbling around him. And my uncle? Was he part of this conspiracy? Your uncle was a good man who genuinely believed he was protecting you, Dr. Morrison assured him. We arranged for him to adopt you under a false identity. He never knew about your true heritage. We thought it would be safer that way. But somehow the Shadow Syndicate found me anyway, Marcus said, remembering the events that had led to his exile 3 years ago. Both women went silent. Marcus turned from the viewing port to find them staring at him with expressions of shock and concern. Marcus, Liriana said carefully, what are you talking about? For a moment, Marcus considered lying. He kept the truth buried for 3 years, and old habits died hard. But these women had just shared secrets that could reshape galactic history. Perhaps it was time for some honesty of his own. 3 years ago, I was Captain Marcus Chun of the UES Prometheus, he began. We were conducting a diplomatic mission to the Kepler 442 system when we encountered what appeared to be a derelict ship. Our scans showed it was ancient, possibly pre-Federation technology. I made the decision to investigate. He moved back to the bed and sat down heavily, the weight of memory pressing down on him like a physical force. The ship wasn't derelict. It was a trap. The moment we boarded, our systems were compromised. The entire crew, 47 people, were killed by some kind of neural weapon. I only survived because I was wearing an experimental shield generator that my chief engineer had been working on. Dr. Morrison leaned forward intently. Did you see who attacked you? Not clearly. They wore environmental suits that obscured their features. But I heard them talking. They were specifically looking for Captain Chun, for me. They knew exactly who I was and why they were there. What happened after that? I managed to get back to my ship and send a distress signal, but by the time rescue arrived, I was the only survivor. The investigation concluded that I had made an error in judgment by boarding an unknown vessel, resulting in the death of my crew. I was court-martialed and stripped of rank. Marcus's voice grew bitter. The funny thing is, I agreed with him. I blamed myself completely. It never occurred to me that I might have been the target all along. Liriana and Dr. Morrison exchanged troubled glances. Marcus, Liriana said softly, the ship you encountered, did you see any markings or identifying features? Yes. There was a symbol painted on the hull. 3 serpents wrapped around a star. Both women went pale. The Shadow Syndicate, Dr. Morrison whispered. They've been hunting you for years, even before they knew what you were. Your bloodline must trigger some kind of recognition at the genetic level. Which means, Liriana added grimly, that now that your identity has been publicly revealed, you're in more danger than ever. Every assassin, mercenary, and zealot in the galaxy will be looking for you. As if summoned by her words, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the station's AI announced in multiple languages, Security Alert Level 7. All residents proceed to designated safe areas immediately. This is not a drill. The room's communication panel crackled to life. Your Majesty, this is Admiral Forlack. We have multiple unidentified ships approaching the station at high speed. They're not responding to our hails, and their weapon signatures match known Shadow Syndicate vessels. Marcus felt a familiar sensation, the same cold certainty that had served him well during his military career. Despite everything he'd learned in the past few hours, despite the confusion and disbelief his tactical training was taking over. How many ships? He asked, moving to the communication panel. 12 confirmed, possibly more hiding in the nebula's electromagnetic interference, Forlack reported. We've got civilian transports trying to evacuate, but they won't all make it out before the attackers arrive. Marcus looked at Liriana and Dr. Morrison. Is there a command center on this station? Yes, but Marcus, you can't possibly be thinking of— I'm thinking that I spent 15 years learning how to defend civilian populations from hostile forces, Marcus interrupted. Emperor or Janitor, that doesn't change who I am. Dr. Morrison shook her head. You don't understand. If the Shadow Syndicate captures you alive, they won't just kill you. They'll use you to legitimize their claim to the Empire. With a puppet emperor under their control, they could plunge the galaxy into a war that makes the current chaos look peaceful. Then, they can't be allowed to capture me, Marcus said simply. Admiral Forlack, I'm coming to the command center. What's the station's defensive capability? There was a pause before Forlack responded. Your Majesty, with respect, you're too valuable to— Admiral, Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone of command that had served him aboard the Prometheus. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm giving you an order. What are our defenses? Another pause, then Nexus 7 has military-grade shields and weapons systems, Your Majesty. We can hold off a small fleet for several hours, but we weren't designed to be a fortress. Several hours should be enough. Are there any Federation ships in the area? The cruiser Valiant is en route, but she won't arrive for at least 4 hours. Marcus nodded, his mind already working through tactical possibilities. He turned to face the two women who had just turned his world upside down. I need to ask you both something, and I need honest answers. Dr. Morrison, Ambassador Liriana, do you believe that I'm really the heir to this empire? Not just genetically, but in terms of actual capability and worthiness. Dr. Morrison spoke first. Your mother believed you would be extraordinary. She saw something in the genetic patterns that went beyond mere bloodline. She thought you might be capable of things that no one has achieved since the original Wanderers. And you, Ambassador? Liriana studied him for a long moment. An hour ago, I watched a simple maintenance worker demonstrate more natural authority than most beings who've spent centuries in positions of power. The way you just took command of this situation, the way Admiral Forlack immediately deferred to your judgment, that's not something that can be faked or taught. You may not believe it yet, but you are already acting like an emperor. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a sense of rightness that he hadn't experienced since before the Prometheus incident. For 3 years, he'd been running from responsibility, hiding from the weight of command that had once cost him everything he cared about. But now, faced with a crisis that threatened innocent lives, he remembered why he'd chosen to serve in the first place. Then, let's go save this station, he said. And maybe along the way, we'll figure out what it means to be the Emperor of 200 worlds. As they left the Imperial suite and headed for the command center, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Shadow Syndicate had found him, which meant that his quiet exile was over. From this moment forward, every decision he made would affect the lives of trillions of beings across the galaxy. The weight of an empire was settling on his shoulders, and Marcus Chun, former Starship Captain, former Janitor, and current reluctant Emperor, would either rise to meet it or be crushed beneath its burden. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't go down without a fight. The command center of Nexus Station 7 was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, a massive circular chamber where beings from dozens of civilizations worked together to monitor traffic, trade, and security across 3-star systems. Now that same chamber buzzed with the controlled chaos of impending battle as officers scrambled to coordinate the station's defenses. Marcus entered the command center, still wearing his maintenance jumpsuit, a detail that wasn't lost on the assembled staff. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as alien officers turned to stare at the human who had somehow become the most important person in the galaxy. Some looked skeptical, others curious, but all of them were watching to see what their new emperor would do. Admiral Forlack stood at the center of it all, his massive Andromedan frame towering over the tactical display. His people were known for their military prowess, and his reputation as a strategist was legendary throughout the fleet. When he saw Marcus approaching, he snapped to attention with a precision that would have impressed a parade ground inspector. Your Majesty, he rumbled, his gravelly voice carrying easily across the chamber. Status report. 12 confirmed hostile vessels, all bearing Shadow Syndicate markings. They'll be in weapons range in approximately 14 minutes. Marcus studied the tactical display, the familiar sight of ship positions, and trajectory vectors helping to settle his nerves. What's their composition? 6 fast attack cruisers, 4 heavy destroyers, and 2 ships we can't identify, possible stealth vessels or specialized assault craft. They're maintaining a standard encirclement pattern, cutting off our escape routes while staying just outside our defensive perimeter. They're not trying to destroy the station, Marcus observed. They want something intact. "You," said a new voice. Marcus turned to see a tall, willowy figure with pale blue skin and silver eyes, Commander Zarathul of the Etherian Navy. Her people were known for their psychic abilities and their skill at reading the intentions of other beings. They're broadcasting on encrypted channels, but my telepaths are picking up fragments of their communications. They want you alive, Your Majesty. Dr. Morrison and Ambassador Liriana had followed Marcus into the command center, and now Dr. Morrison stepped forward. That confirms what we suspected. The Shadow Syndicate needs a legitimate heir to justify their claim to the Empire. A dead emperor is a martyr, but a controlled emperor is a puppet. Marcus nodded grimly, which means they'll try to minimize casualties among the civilian population. They need witnesses to see me surrender voluntarily. He turned back to the tactical display. "Admiral, what's the evacuation status?" 60% of civilian transports have successfully departed, Forlac reported. The remaining vessels are mainly the larger passenger ships that need more time to reach minimum safe distance. And our defensive capabilities? Nexus 7 was designed as a trading hub, not a fortress, Commander Zarathul explained. We have defensive shields rated for meteorite impacts and pirate raids, plus a dozen automated weapon platforms. Against a Shadow Syndicate battle group, we can hold for perhaps 2 hours under optimal conditions. Marcus felt the familiar weight of command settling over him like an old, comfortable coat. The tactical situation was clear: outgunned, outnumbered, and fighting to buy time for civilian evacuation. It was the kind of scenario they drilled endlessly at the Naval Academy, the type of hopeless battle that separated good officers from great ones. "Show me the station's technical specifications," he said. "Everything: power distribution, structural integrity, emergency systems, maintenance, access ways." A young Terran technician, one of the few other humans on the station, rushed to pull up the requested data. Marcus studied the schematics carefully, his engineer's mind working alongside his tactical training to see possibilities that others might miss. "Your Majesty," Admiral Forlax said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about what it means to be human in a galaxy full of species that have been spacefaring for millennia," Marcus replied. "We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the most technologically advanced, but we have one advantage that most species seem to lack." "Which is?" Ambassador Liriana asked. Marcus looked up from the display with a smile that would have been familiar to anyone who had served with him aboard the Prometheus. It was the expression he wore when he was about to attempt something that was either brilliantly innovative or completely insane. "We're really, really good at improvising." He turned to address the entire command center. "All department heads, report to the tactical station immediately. I need engineering, security, medical, and civilian affairs coordination. And somebody give me a connection to the Shadow Syndicate fleet. It's time to open negotiations." The next few minutes were a flurry of activity as Marcus outlined his plan. It was audacious, risky, and relied on timing so precise that a few seconds delay could mean disaster. But as he explained the details, Marcus could see understanding and then enthusiasm dawning on the faces around him. "You want to turn the entire station into a weapon?" Admiral Forlac asked, his eyes widening with what might have been admiration. "Not a weapon," Marcus corrected. "A trap. The Shadow Syndicate thinks they're hunting one man. They don't realize they're about to tangle with the combined ingenuity of 20 different species working together." Commander Zarathul's silver eyes gleamed with anticipation. "My telepaths can coordinate the timing across all departments simultaneously. No communication delays, no chance of interception. Engineering can reroute power from the commercial fusion reactors, reported Chief Engineer Karath, a stocky dwarven-descended being whose people have been building impossible machines for thousands of years. We'll have enough energy to overload every system on the station simultaneously. Medical teams are standing by to treat both our people and any survivors from the attacking vessels, added Dr. Elon, the station's chief medical officer. We're setting up triage centers in the lower decks. Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride in the beings around him. This was what he had missed during his exile. The sense of working with skilled professionals who could take an impossible plan and make it reality through sheer competence and determination. Your Majesty, the communication officer called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Shadow Syndicate vessel. They're demanding immediate surrender and your unconditional cooperation. Put them through, Marcus said, straightening his shoulders and assuming the bearing he had once worn as a starship captain. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. The being wore the hooded robes typical of Shadow Syndicate operatives, but something about the voice was familiar, terrifyingly familiar. Hello, Marcus, the figure said, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Or should I say, Your Imperial Majesty? It's been a long time. The voice belonged to someone Marcus had hoped never to hear again. Dr. Elena Vasquez, former head of the Earth Colonial Research Division and Dr. Morrison's one-time colleague. The woman who had supposedly died in the same transport accident as Marcus's parents. Elena. Dr. Morrison gasped from behind Marcus. But you're dead. I saw the wreckage myself. The hooded figure laughed, a sound like broken glass. Death is such a limiting concept. Sarah, I've discovered that there are far more interesting alternatives. Marcus, surely you remember our last conversation? On the bridge of the Prometheus, just before your crew met their unfortunate end. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. You were behind the attack on my ship. I was behind many things, Elena replied. The death of your parents, the systematic elimination of Wanderer descendants, the careful orchestration of chaos throughout the Kethvarian Empire. All the necessary steps to prepare for this moment. Why? Marcus demanded. What could possibly justify power? Elena said simply. The Wanderers possessed knowledge that could reshape the galaxy. Marcus, technologies that could grant immortality, unlimited energy, the ability to manipulate space, and time itself. Your bloodline is the key to unlocking those secrets. Around the command center, Marcus could see his staff working frantically to implement his plan. Time was running out, but he needed to keep Elena talking. And you think controlling me will give you access to this knowledge? Control is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as partnership. Join me willingly, Marcus, and together we can unlock the full potential of your heritage. Refuse, and I'll be forced to extract what I need through less pleasant methods. Marcus looked around the command center, at Admiral Forlak coordinating the defensive systems, at Commander Zarathul preparing her telepathic network, at Dr. Morrison, whose face showed a mixture of grief and determination. These beings had accepted him as their emperor not because of his bloodline, but because of his actions. They were willing to risk their lives for him, and he couldn't let them down. I have a counter-proposal, Marcus said calmly. Come aboard the station personally, and we'll discuss your terms face-to-face. Surely you're not afraid of one human janitor? Elena's laugh was genuinely delighted. Oh, Marcus, you always did have a talent for walking into obvious traps. Very well, I'll come aboard for our little chat. But don't think your amateur hour tactics will save you. I've been planning this for decades. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. Admiral Forlak turned to Marcus with concern written across his craggy features. Your Majesty, surely you're not seriously considering. I'm considering winning this battle and saving every life on this station, Marcus interrupted. Elena Vasquez thinks she understands me, but she's operating with 3-year-old information. She has no idea what I've learned about leadership, about sacrifice, about the true cost of command. Marcus moved to the center of the command center, where the tactical display showed the approaching Shadow Syndicate fleet like a constellation of death closing in around the station. All department heads, final status report. Are we ready? Engineering systems primed and ready, Chief Koroth reported. Telepathic network established and synchronized, Commander Zarathul confirmed. Defensive systems armed and targeting solutions locked, Admiral Forlak announced. Medical teams in position, Dr. Elan added. Evacuation 90% complete, reported the civilian coordinator. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of command settle fully onto his shoulders. In a few minutes, he would either save thousands of lives and deal a crippling blow to the galaxy's most dangerous criminal organization, or he would fail spectacularly and doom the Empire to centuries of shadow rule. All stations, prepare for Operation Wanderer's return, he announced. On my mark, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the innocent under the protection of the human emperor. Through the command center's viewing ports, Marcus could see the Shadow Syndicate ships moving into final attack position. Somewhere among those vessels was Elena Vasquez, the woman who had destroyed his old life and was now trying to steal his new one. But Marcus Chun was no longer the broken exile who had hidden among the station's maintenance staff. He was an emperor, descendant of the legendary Wanderers, and he had an empire to save. The battle for the crown was about to begin, and Marcus intended to win it in a way that would send a message to every would-be usurper in the galaxy. Humanity had returned to claim its destiny among the stars, and they would not go gently into anyone's night. Mark, he said quietly, and the fate of 200 worlds hung in the balance. Operation Wanderer's return began with the subtlety of a whisper and escalated to the fury of a solar storm within the span of 30 seconds. Marcus watched from the command center as the first phase unfolded exactly as planned. The Shadow Syndicate fleet moved into attack formation, their ships spreading out in a perfect sphere around Nexus Station 7. Elena Vasquez's flagship, a heavily modified Kethvarian dreadnought that had probably been stolen from an Imperial armory, took position directly above the station's primary docking bay. Boarding shuttle launching from the flagship, reported Lieutenant Torres, the station's sensor operator. Single craft, minimal escort. They're actually coming. Of course they are, Marcus said, his voice carrying an edge that made several nearby officers glance at him with surprise. Elena always was overconfident. She thinks this is just another chess game where she gets to arrange all the pieces. Admiral Forlak moved closer to Marcus's position. Your Majesty, are you certain about the timing? Once we commit to this course of action, there will be no retreat. Marcus studied the tactical display, watching the complex dance of ships and energy signatures that represented the immediate future of the Empire. Everything had to be perfect, too early, and Elena would escape. Too late, and thousands of innocent beings would die. I'm certain, he said. Commander Zarathul, how's the telepathic network? The Etherian officer's silver eyes were slightly unfocused as she maintained contact with psychically gifted beings throughout the station. All stations report ready, Your Majesty. My people can coordinate the timing to within microseconds. Chief Koroth, engineering status? Fusion reactors are running at optimal efficiency, the Dwarven engineer reported. Power coupling modifications are complete. We can channel the entire station's energy output through the defensive grid on your command. Marcus nodded, then turned to Dr. Morrison, who had remained silent throughout the preparations. Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Based on your research into Wanderer genetics, is there any truth to Elena's claims about advanced technologies? Dr. Morrison's expression was troubled. There's definitely more to your bloodline than we initially understood. Some of the genetic sequences we've identified don't match any known biological patterns. It's as if the Wanderers incorporated non-organic elements into their DNA itself. What kind of non-organic elements? We're not sure. Quantum resonance patterns, perhaps, or some form of encoded information storage. Your mother theorized that the genetic markers might actually be instructions, a kind of biological blueprint for technologies we haven't invented yet. Marcus felt a strange sensation as if something deep in his genetic code was responding to the conversation. For a moment, the command center seemed to shimmer around him, and he could swear he heard whispered voices speaking in languages that predated recorded history. "Your Majesty?" Admiral Forlax's concerned voice snapped Marcus back to the present. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Something was definitely happening to him, something that went beyond normal human experience. But there would be time to worry about that later. Right now, he had a battle to win. "Boarding shuttle has docked," Lieutenant Torres announced. Security sensors showed 12 figures disembarking. "They're heading for the diplomatic level." "Right on schedule," Marcus said. "Security teams fall back to positions Beta through Delta. Let them think they're winning." The next few minutes played out like a carefully choreographed dance. Elena's operatives moved through the station's corridors, encountering token resistance that gradually gave way before their advance. To outside observers, it would look like Nexus 7's defenses were crumbling under the assault. Meanwhile, the Shadow Syndicate fleet maintained their positions, weapons trained on the station but holding fire. They wanted their prize intact, which was exactly what Marcus was counting on. "Your Majesty," came a call from the security chief. "The boarding party has reached Deck 7. They're moving toward the command center." "Excellent. All stations prepare for Phase 2. Marcus turned to Ambassador Liriana, who had been quietly observing the proceedings. "Ambassador, I need you to do something that might seem cowardly, but it's actually the most important part of this entire operation." "What do you need?" "I need you to record everything that happens in the next few minutes. No matter what Elena says or does, no matter how this battle ends, the galaxy needs to see the truth about who she is and what she's done." Liriana's eyes widened with understanding. "You're not just fighting for the station. You're fighting for the legitimacy of your claim to the throne." "Exactly. Elena wants to control the Empire through me, but she's also trying to discredit the very concept of imperial authority. She needs the galaxy to believe that emperors are just figureheads to be manipulated. I need to prove otherwise." The command center's main entrance suddenly exploded inward, the reinforced doors turning to molten slag under the impact of military-grade plasma charges. Through the smoke and debris strode Elena Vasquez, no longer bothering with hooded robes. She wore the black and silver uniform of a Shadow Syndicate admiral, her dark hair streaked with cybernetic implants that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Behind her came 11 operatives, each one a member of a different species. Marcus recognized the tactical significance immediately. Elena had assembled a team that could counter any defensive measure the station might deploy. Andromedan soldiers for brute force, Etherian psychics to block telepathic coordination, Kethvarian assassins for precision strikes. "Hello, Marcus," Elena said, her voice carrying the same calm confidence it had always possessed. "I have to say, you've certainly moved up in the world since our last meeting. From Starship Captain to Galactic Emperor in just 3 years. Most impressive." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Elena's team and the command center staff. "Hello, Elena. You're looking well for someone who's supposed to be dead." "Death is highly overrated," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've discovered much more interesting alternatives. Cybernetic enhancement, genetic modification, consciousness transfer. The Shadow Syndicate has access to technologies that make the Federation look like children playing with toys, including the technology that kill my crew." "Oh, that was just a neural disruptor. Crude, but effective for eliminating inconvenient witnesses. Though I must admit, I was disappointed when you survived. It forced me to take a much more roundabout approach to reaching this moment." Elena moved closer, her cybernetic implants pulsing brighter. "But now we're here, and you're going to come with me voluntarily. You see, Marcus, I need you intact and cooperative. The Wanderer genetic sequences in your DNA are encrypted in a way that requires conscious activation. Torture might damage the delicate biological mechanisms involved. And if I refuse?" Elena gestured toward her operatives, each of whom had drawn weapons that Marcus didn't recognize, but that looked extremely dangerous. "Then I'll be forced to kill everyone on this station, starting with your new friends here." Dr. Morrison, Admiral Forlack, Ambassador Liriana. They'll all die very unpleasant deaths while you watch. Marcus felt that strange sensation again, stronger this time. The whispered voices were getting louder, and he was beginning to understand what they were saying. Instructions, warnings, promises of power that came with terrible costs. You know what, Elena? Marcus said, his voice taking on a tone that made several people step backward. I think you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. And what would that be? You're assuming that I'm the same broken man you left behind 3 years ago. You're assuming that I haven't learned anything about who I really am or what I'm capable of. Elena's confident smile flickered slightly. Marcus, whatever you're planning, I'm not planning anything, Marcus interrupted. I'm remembering what the Wanderers really were, and why they disappeared from the galaxy 1,500 years ago. The whispered voices were becoming a roar now, and Marcus could feel something awakening in his genetic code. Ancient knowledge flowing through his consciousness like water through a broken dam. Suddenly, he understood technologies that wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years, saw patterns in space, and time that revealed the true structure of reality itself. They didn't disappear, Elena, Marcus said, his eyes beginning to glow with the same blue light that pulsed in her cybernetic implants. They transcended. They became something greater than any single species, any single form of existence. And they left instructions for their descendants, instructions encoded in the very fabric of their DNA. Elena's face went pale. That's impossible. The genetic sequences are dormant. They can't be activated without the proper technological interface. You mean like this? Marcus raised his hand, and every piece of technology in the command center began to respond to his will. Displays flickered to life without being touched, computers processed data at impossible speeds, and the station's defensive systems suddenly operated with a precision that defied their original programming specifications. Phase 3, Marcus said quietly, and Commander Zurathol's telepathic network transmitted his words to every department on the station simultaneously. What happened next would be talked about in military academies and strategic planning centers for centuries to come. Nexus Station 7 transformed from a commercial trading hub into the most dangerous weapons platform in the galaxy, all in the space of 30 seconds. The station's fusion reactors synchronized their output, channeling power through modified energy conduits that Chief Karath had spent the past hour carefully reconfiguring. That energy fed into the defensive grid, which Marcus's awakened consciousness had just reprogrammed to operate far beyond its original specifications. Elena's operatives opened fire, their exotic weapons discharged, harmlessly absorbed by personal shields that materialized around each member of the command center staff. The shields weren't technological. They were manifestations of pure energy directed by Marcus's enhanced awareness. Impossible, Elena breathed, raising her own weapon, a device that looked like it could punch holes in starship hulls. Not impossible, Marcus replied calmly. Just improbable. The difference between the two is something your limited understanding can't grasp. He gestured toward the tactical display, which now showed the Shadow Syndicate fleet in perfect detail, including the positions of ships that had been hidden in the nebula's interference. Did you really think 12 ships would be enough? The Wanderers didn't build an empire by being careless about military planning. Elena's eyes widened as she saw the display. How are you detecting our stealth vessels? I'm not detecting them, Marcus said. I'm seeing them. There's a difference. Just like there's a difference between commanding through fear and commanding through understanding. He turned to Admiral Forlack, who was staring at the impossible readings on his instruments with professional fascination. Admiral, are the civilian evacuations complete? Yes, Your Majesty. All non-essential personnel have cleared minimum safe distance. Excellent. Then, let's show the Shadow Syndicate what happens when they threaten innocent beings under Imperial protection. Marcus raised both hands, and Nexus Station 7 became something unprecedented in galactic history, a weapon that operated not through brute force, but through the precise application of scientific principles that most civilizations wouldn't discover for millennia. The station's energy output focused into 12 perfectly calibrated beams that reached out across space to touch each ship in Elena's fleet. They weren't destructive beams. They were something far more elegant and infinitely more terrifying. Each beam rewrote the quantum signatures of the targeted ship's weapon systems, turning their own armaments against them. Plasma cannons imploded, torpedo launchers detonated their own ammunition, and energy shields collapsed under feedback loops that no engineer had ever imagined possible. Within minutes, the entire Shadow Syndicate fleet was disabled, their crews trapped aboard powerless hulks that drifted helplessly in space. Elena stared at the tactical display in shock. This is impossible. No single being could coordinate that level of technological manipulation. You're right, Marcus agreed. No single being could. But I'm not single being anymore, Elena. I'm the inheritor of 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge, the living repository of technologies that your cybernetic enhancements can barely comprehend. He stepped closer to her, and she could see the depth of intelligence that now blazed behind his eyes. The Wanderers didn't disappear because they were defeated. They disappeared because they evolved beyond the need for physical existence. They became living information, consciousness encoded in quantum patterns that could survive the death of stars. And you're saying that's what you are now? I'm saying that's what I'm becoming. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Elena's hand moved toward a concealed weapon, but she froze as every piece of technology on her person suddenly ceased to function. Her cybernetic implants went dark, her weapons powered down, and even her artificial life support systems switched to minimal power. I'd advise against resistance, Marcus said gently. Your cybernetic enhancements are impressive, but they operate on principles that the Wanderers mastered before your species learned to make fire. Elena stood in the center of the command center, surrounded by enemies, her fleet defeated, her technological advantages neutralized. For the first time in decades, she was truly helpless. And in that moment, Marcus made the decision that would define his reign as emperor for generations to come.